Hey everybody, this is super exciting and special. This is Muraje in Carema. Um, I don't know, maybe you remember my Instagram post and stories and stuff about this. So I was in Piedmont at the very beginning of October and I visited Muraje. I'm gonna move so that I think I'm in the center of the camera shot here. In Carema. Carema is this tiny DOC up in the foothills of the Alps, up in Alto Piemonte. But when I say up in the Alps, it's really up there in the mountains. It's right on the border of Val d'Aosta. It's a tiny spot. There's, I think today, about 22 hectares of vineyards. Actually, when I say vineyards, 22 hectares of vines in Carema. At the peak, I don't know, 100 years ago, maybe there were 90 hectares, something like that. But, you know, tiny, tiny appellation. All of the vines, they don't grow grapes on flat land. All of the vines are on the mountainsides, up on pergola. You can see this here. They have these little stone pillars called tonine, but I guess individual ones tonino. And then the vines grow up on wooden pergolas above them, on little terraces, on little rock walls up the sides of the mountains. So the vines are really, literally just growing out of rocks on the mountainside. And the reason they would do this was to keep the vines up off the ground, but also to preserve the ground so they could use it for growing other crops. So they could grow potatoes and stuff like that on these little terraces, so they could maximize the amount of produce they could get from their tiny amount of land here. So this is made by Federico and Deborah Santini. 2015 was their first vintage. They fell in love with this place, and I can totally see why. It's just this amazing, incredible, hard to even believe it exists, mountainside town in the Alps. They have like 1.3 hectares. When the vineyards were all laid out, I don't know, hundreds of years ago, they predate the automobile and stuff like that. So it's all just accessible by mule tracks. Most of the vineyards you have to get to on foot or with a mule, or they have some people use tiny little four-wheel drive mini trucks imported from Japan. So I drove all around with Federico in a mini truck, and then from there we hiked up and down all over. So Federico and Deborah have about 1.3 hectares of vines, approximately 50 years old, and they are some of the craziest, hardest to access vineyards, because they're buying the vineyards from older retiring winemakers, and you're an elderly retiring winemaker in Carema up there in the Alps. What vineyard are you going to sell first? Are you going to sell the one that's by the road that's like you can still get to, or are you going to sell the one that's like way up on the mountainside that you have to hike for like a quarter of a mile over stones and up hand laid steps from 100 years ago? Like if you're getting older and you're getting ready to retire and you're downsizing your vineyards, of course you're going to sell the craziest, hardest to get to, most inaccessible vineyards first. So that's a lot of what Federico has. It was a mind-blowing experience seeing all of this. And I've written tasting notes on this, but I just wanted to make a video so that I have a video too about how incredible this wine is. This is bottle number 740 out of 2,510 bottles of the Carema Sumé produced in 2019. And it's crazy, like local clones of Nebbiolo. This is Nebbiolo Picotenere. Picotenere is a different version of Nebbiolo that's suited to the climate here, to the cold, the wind, how long the growing season is, the amount of rain they get, stuff like that. It smells so floral. It's so pretty. It's flowers Last night I didn't smell as much like roses. I smelled more like lilac and cherry blossoms and stuff. I smell cherry. I smell raspberry. Dried like wild red cherries, raspberries, some rose now, but definitely still like cherry blossom and maybe a little bit of lilac. But definitely also has aromatic herbal qualities. Like it smells a little bit like thyme, I think. Maybe sage. Maybe a little bit like basil now. It's so pretty. It's so high-toned. It's so serious and structured at the same time. It's just hard to get my head around this. Freight train. Dried red cherries, some raspberry right up front. It's super pretty. Raspberry, cherry, and then there's salt on the mid palate that makes it really tasty and delicious. You know, but it's gentle and sort of underneath and behind the fruit. Then more tannin comes in. It's got sort of a darker, sort of brambly tannin to it. It's destemmed, you know, right on the grapes getting to the winery, so it's not. It doesn't spend time on the stems. It gets richer and richer. Gosh, there's pomegranate in here on the back end of it. Really ripe red cherry. Some cranberry comes in. A little bit more like delicate raspberry. It's clearly Nebbiolo, but it's so exceptional. It's clearly a unique, unusual expression of Nebbiolo. And the balance and the integration of this is just insane. Man, it's incredible. I got 18 bottles. So there's 17 bottles currently that are available for sale in Maine. That's it. That's the allocation for the state. It's pretty insane. Really fantastically good. Really, really special, unique place. This is what I love about wine.